Heroes Like Us is a series intended at sharing comic book characters from various backgrounds and identities. We won't always get everything right, so feel free to make amendments and corrections in the comments. They're always appreciated. What's not appreciated, however, is any form of hate speech or intolerance, so comments of that nature will be immediately deleted and those users blocked from this channel. This is a place of education and celebration. Welcome to I'm Your Target Demographic, and welcome to Heroes Like Us, our series where each episode we take a look at a certain identity and then we look at comic book characters that have that identity. Today we are talking about comic book characters that are on the autistic spectrum. So there's not a lot, but we're going to cover the ones that have been known, and then there's one that's pretty debatable, which we'll get to last. So let's start this conversation with Mr. Fantastic from Marvel Comics, Reed Richards. Reed Richards is one of, if not the smartest mortal on Earth. He is incredibly gifted. He is a super genius, and from a very young age, they knew this. He was always quick to pick things up. By the time he was 18, he had 4 degrees in engineering and physics and math. He is incredibly smart and unrivaled. He's so focused on projects that he's working on, though, that he becomes somewhat cold and distant to others, or at least it appears that way. He just wants to focus on the task at hand, and he's thinking about that nonstop. And sometimes he gets frustrated when there's a project and he knows the answer, knows how to solve it, but he can't work fast enough, or he can't make his hands do what it needs to do fast enough, that he becomes frustrated. He did, however, create kind of his big project when he was growing up was a shuttle to travel into space. And he got funding from, the government, and he did all this, and they were about to shut it down. And he said, we're going to do this. So he took 3 others into space with him. He took his kind of romantic partner at the time, Sue, his best friend, Ben, and Sue's younger brother, Johnny. And the 4 of them went into space, where they were bombarded by cosmic rays, they were given powers, and that's where they became the Fantastic Four. So Reed gained the ability to basically become elastic, where he could stretch and mold his body, kind of becoming almost, he couldn't really be hurt, he could kind of take damage, he could, all sorts of implications of becoming this putty-like substance. As the leader of the Fantastic Four, he puts his mind to great use, kind of solving all sorts of cosmic problems and encounters with beings that are driven to destroy Earth. And his natural inclination isn't to fight them, but to come up with a solution or a negotiation, that he's kind of constantly thinking about the best way to tackle any problem, and it's gotten them out of a lot of situations and has saved Earth many, many times. Mr. Fantastic has appeared in a couple different movies, most notably played by Ian Grufford and Miles Teller. Up next from DC Comics, we've got Black Manta. Now, DC is complicated. There are tons of origins for Black Manta. I found 3 or 4. But the 2 that are most significant here and that really tie into his history of autism is one where he was abducted as a child into kind of the slavery, and he was kind of quiet and wouldn't talk to anyone until he rebelled and killed his captors. But this whole time he was on a ship, and he became kind of angry about the sea and Aquaman's inaction to protect him and save him, where it kind of drove him to this. The other origin that kind of ties in here is that he's an orphan, and they send him to Arkham. They don't know what to do with him. They don't know how to handle him being on the spectrum. And so instead of trying to kind of positively work through it and come up with solutions, they try to change him physically with electroshock therapy, which makes him angry and violent, and kind of resulting in the same thing, where he is a villain and he tries to stop Aquaman, and he wants to take over the oceans. And he does this with his kind of high-tech gear and a suit that can blast out, blast from the eyes. And most notably, he kind of has an army of minions, and he wants to defeat Aquaman and take over the oceans. Now, for our next 2, we don't have a lot of pictures. These are characters that were either around a long time ago or were fairly short in terms of how often they were in the stories, and so there's not a lot of pictures. So first, we have Dummy from Marvel Comics, Dean Boswell. Now, Dean is on the spectrum, and he becomes a mutant when he's a teenager. And his mutant ability is basically to become a gas form. So as he's kind of gaining these powers, they put him into a latex suit, which makes him look like a crash test dummy, which is where he gets the name. He kind of has to live inside this suit now because without it, his body would just dissipate. He did not stay around long. There were many times where his suit would get cut and he would kind of start to seep out until eventually he was kind of cut completely and his body just went into the environment. So it's not really believed that he's dead, but he's unable to form again. But he is seemingly still alive all around us. Up next from Marvel Comics, we've got a character by the name of Pathway Laura Dean. Now this is an old story, and so these pictures are horrible. She is part of a pair of twins, and her mutant ability, for some reason, came to life when she was in the womb. And her sister was going to be a mutant and kind of was very grotesque, and so the parents were like, we're going to kill it. So she teleports in the womb her sister to another dimension where her sister grows up, and her sister is kind of this goblin-like creature named Goblin. So Laura grows up not really knowing that any of this really happened. She barely speaks, very kind of introverted and introspective. And her ability kind of, as she gets older, she starts to learn to control it, to open these pathways and these portals where she comes across her sister and they're reunited together. They serve under Department H in Alpha Flight and Beta Flight. But they don't stay around a long time. Their stories ended a while ago. I'm not sure if they're dead or not, but they have not been seen in quite a long time. Now, lastly, we have the debatable one. And this is beyond my ability to really debate this, but I'm just going to tell you what's happening, what the conversation is. And this is about the character known as Legion David Haller from Marvel Comics. Now, Legion is complicated because there's a lot of overlap between his mutant abilities and what people would consider a disorder. So Marvel, a long time ago, said that he was on the autistic spectrum, but his characteristics and personality don't necessarily line up with that diagnosis. So some people are like, Marvel said it. Marvel said that he's autistic. But he really shows signs of what is called dissociative identity disorder, which used to be called multiple personalities. Some people also kind of incorrectly call it schizophrenia, that he just hears voices. Both of those are a little more possible than autism. That really he was fine. He didn't show any symptoms until he was a teenager when his mutant abilities started to develop, which in the case of most cases of autism, you see very visible signs as a child. Within the first couple years, there are indicators that they might be on the spectrum. And this was not the case with David. So there's a lot of conversation back and forth about, well, this doesn't line up with what they said he had. So I'm not going to get too much into it, but you can make your own decision on if you think this lines up with someone, being on the spectrum, or if it does not. I think it was just a case of maybe the writers throwing out buzzwords and terms that they didn't understand to diagnose this very complicated character, and they misdiagnosed the character. But now some people take that as law, as the truth, as canon. So you can think about that however you want, but those are the handful of characters that I could find that were on the autistic spectrum. I hope you appreciated this. If there's other identities that you want me to try to look into, let me know. There's some that are very specific that I'm really struggling with, but hopefully someday I'll find enough to warrant an entire video about some of these very small populations. But I'm working on it. So thanks for your patience and thanks for watching Heroes Like Us.